Hey, folks. Welcome to the Integral Stages Meta Podcast. I'm Layman Pascal, and about a year ago, I said to myself, Jesus Christ, why am I talking to so many authors, lecturers, and institute founders? Are they special? Is that where the action is? Or is it maybe just as important to talk with podcasters, YouTube channelers, TikTokers, clubhousers, and all the depraved slingers of virtual ashrams and other mutant online gatherings? So we started this meta podcast series, and our very first guest on our very first episode was Stephanie Lepp, the Stephster, talking about her podcast work on Reckonings. And Stephanie was speaking with people who'd actually undergone meaningful change in how they viewed or felt about the world. What does it actually take for transformation in our lived experience? And now, a year later, I've talked to damn near everybody, and Steph is back with a Webby Award for her spin-off miniseries Deep Reckonings, in which she deploys deepfake technology to template confessions and awakenings from well-known and problematic public personalities, and tries to do it in a way that might even be palatable to the problematic person involved. We're very glad to have her back, a harbinger of transformation and the uncanny albatross around the neck of digitally infused personal reckonings everywhere. It's Stephanie Lepp. Hi, Steph.
Hi. Hi, Layman. Good to be back. I totally forgot that I was the first. I'm so honored.
Right.
Are you just going to go through the exact same?
Yeah, let's just do the whole exact same interview over again.
Y'all, we're going on a ride here. Yeah, same season, different year.
It was, I think, talking to you that time really helped me think out what I wanted the series to be.
I'm glad. Yeah. And hopefully this can help you continue thinking of what it can continue becoming.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's why I said harbinger of transformation, because maybe this is the start of the new series. Maybe you're the first guest on whatever it's about to become.
All right. Here we go. The next level.
We don't want to spend too much time on the deets of your synthetic media projects. People can find out lots about it, and you've been on Rutt's podcast and Garfield's podcast, and it's all over. But we're not a news service here, though we should touch in a little bit on what's been going on. What the hell is a Webby Award? Who were you running against? Do you have to give an acceptance speech? How does that whole thing work?
Yeah, so I actually didn't even realize kind of how big the Webbies were until I was nominated, and people told me, they were like, Steph, wow, that's like the Oscars of the internet. I was like, oh, okay, well, sweet. I mean, yeah, and honestly, who I was running against, I also didn't totally realize it's a lot of institutional media players, it's like Hulu and Netflix, and so I think it's actually a little more unusual for there to be kind of like independent people in the mix. I know in my category, I was up against Hulu. So yeah, so it's very cool. It's very cool to be recognized with a Webby, and I actually won too. And for a second there, I was like, should I give the second trophy to someone else? And my husband was like, no, Steph, you won 2 trophies, and you should just have them both. So when
do you get an actual trophy?
Yeah, I'm getting it, and I will. And then another friend of mine was like, "You should, in the Zoom era, like they should really be within view." So I'm going to need to figure out like where they should go around here. But yeah, one on either side. And the speech, I love that you're asking about the speech. Yeah, so Webby, I guess the Webbies are kind of like known for that you only get 5 words in your acceptance speech, which a lot of people use in a very earnest. It's like Black Lives Matter, always, forever, which I absolutely agree with. And that's not totally my style when I'm going to go for a 5-word speech. So I actually had 2. I had the speech that I gave, and I'll tell you the runner-up speech because you will actually understand. So I actually had my 9-month-old do my speech. And since he's 9 months, what his speech was goo, gee, ah. Which I think he nailed it. I mean, that really just totally communicated exactly what I was trying to say. But then my runner-up speech was my daughter. I'm really engaging my kids here. My daughter holding up a pipe, saying, "This is not a speech," which I just thought would fly over people's heads. But I really love that speech too. I'm actually considering submitting that speech as my Webby entry for next year. No, people responded about the speeches. Like, I honestly think I heard from people who don't even know what Deep Reckonings is and like didn't even look into it. And we're just so excited about the speeches. So yeah, maybe I'll just submit my speech next year. And I recognize that all of the people, like a lot of the people listening, also have no idea what the project is, but the speeches, definitely check out the speech. Yeah.
Yeah, surrealistic and pre-linguistic speeches. I love it.
It's an important part of how we know what we know about the world, you know?
The other thing I wanted to ask about the actual Deep Reckonings project that
The
I
actual
don't hear
project.
people ask you enough, I think, is how do you get it done? Who else works on it with you?
Yes. You mean on the kind of technical side of
Yeah,
things?
like how do you put it together? Who's involved
Yeah.
with that?
So I should clarify there is both synthetic audio and synthetic video. So synthetic audio is you could just take, like, the AI takes in a lot of data, a lot like of the voice of the person, and creates a model such that you can like type whatever you want and have that model say whatever you want it to say in the person's actual voice. So I didn't actually use synthetic audio for budgetary and legal reasons. I went with voice actors, but you can do synthetic audio, which uses the actual voice of the person. I went with synthetic, and you can combine them, but I did synthetic video. And what that involves is first writing the script. First actually finding a target video of the protagonist,
Right.
Which let's just say Kavanaugh, and maybe so the one liner on what Deep Reckonings is, if you're here and have no idea what is going on, is it is a series of explicitly marked deepfake videos that imagine morally courageous versions of our public figures. So if Brett Kavanaugh had extraordinary moral courage, what would he say, and what would that look like? And I'm not trying to make these people look like fools. Many of them do that enough for themselves. I'm actually I'm steel manning their crisis of conscience, you could say, or just steel manning if they had extraordinary moral courage and had some kind of a reckoning. What are the insights they would come to? What is the wisdom that they would then, speak? And so the actual process itself, yeah. So first I have to find a target video of the person. So, it's like Brett Kavanaugh giving a press conference, or it was actually his acceptance speech.
Right.
Then I write the script with the target video in mind. So it's like, he's in this context, and then record a video of the voice actor reading the script, like a close-up of his face. Yeah, no, people don't usually ask me about the actual like mechanics of it. And then we have to match up clips from the target video with clips of the voice actor, because we're only going to replace the lips. So Kavanaugh's face kind of has to be like moving and gesturing when he's talking, and then paused when he's not talking. And so you have to kind of like match it up. And sometimes if there's going to be like a change in the clip, it's like, or we can't, or something isn't working, it's like we'll cut to the audience or something to like buy us a couple seconds and then cut back. But there is still a lot of like manual labor that kind of goes into this. It's still not just like you just feed the script to the machine and it just does all the work for you. Like, it's still, and the partner that I was working with was doing a lot of things kind of like for the first time, or like figuring out how to do them while we were doing this. So yeah, this is not, I mean, we're all nervous about the democratization of synthetic media, and like we should be, and it's coming. And there's a lot more to say about that, but it's like, this is still a very high barrier endeavor. So that, so we're matching up.
Where do you get the voice actors?
That I think the site is literally voiceover.com.
Okay.
I mean, if I had more wherewithal, I would love to have Matt Damon do Brett Kavanaugh, or have, Jesse, for those of you, so Matt Damon famously did the SNL sketch of Kavanaugh during the hearing. So I'd love to have Jesse Eisenberg do Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
Jesse Eisenberg played him in the I'm about to call it the social dilemma, the social network. And I think that that sounds whatever it sounds, but I think that is actually kind of like a really cool way that an actor can engage in activism, right? I mean, one way that they do is like being spokesperson for causes that are like important and may or may not be super like related or germane to them, but it's like the using their acting skills, I think, would be a very cool way for, and obviously it would take the Matt Damon reading the Kavanaugh script and deciding that he's like on board with it and the overall project. But I think that would be a very cool way for actors to get to engage in activism. But I found these actors on voiceover.com. Yeah. I mean, should I keep explaining the process? You're also welcome to just cut me off and go somewhere else.
Where would you go next in the process? Because I am curious, and I think people, like a lot of people, are interested in how this gets done, and it is going to get easier going forward. So
yeah,
it's fun to trace out a little bit of the still, like you're saying, high barrier situation.
Yeah, I mean, that next actually just comes the AI. Is, it's like you just match up the clips of just like, and what it actually ends up looking like is just Kavanaugh talking. It's a video of Kavanaugh talking when the voice actor is talking, pausing when the voice actor pauses, sometimes cut to audience, maybe to match with what is going on in the script. But it's like the mouth is not whatsoever correlated. It's just like the gestures and the general vibe is matching the voice. Then comes the AI. And the AI is what manipulates his mouth to have him look like he's saying what the voice actor is saying. So, and maybe I should also put, like, a lot of what we think of as deep fakes is just face swapping, is just sticking someone's face. So, the stat that we hear often is that 96% of deep fakes online are involuntary pornography, which is what it sounds like. It's just sticking someone's face in a porn movie they never acted in. So face swapping. What we're talking about here within the context of Deep Reckonings is video dialogue replacement, as it's called. It's actually replacing, it's actually having the person look like they're saying something that they've never said.
I wonder if I would enjoy pornography more if the actors had my own face. I don't know.
I mean, that sounds like it would require a really great relationship with yourself and a great relationship with your sexuality for you to enjoy watching yourself do that. Like,
it would certainly be uncanny at the beginning, but maybe I could get into that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get a little more speculative here.
Where do we go from here? So
okay, here's what I've been thinking about. I'm really curious about the relationship between what I would call demi-reality and changing the world, right? So I'm invested in this thing called the metaphysics of adjacency, which is like a philosophy of not quiteness. And I grew up in the emerging era of reality TV. And I feel like now I live in a Philip K. Dick universe where nobody really knows what anything is. All the information is dubious and customizable. And that can be scary because we don't know how to build on shifting sand. We don't know how to do good sense making in a polluted and hackable information ecology. But it's also got opportunities. There's also a shamanic dimension to it, right? And politicians, notably Donald Trump, seem to have this flavor of the uncanny, archaic wonder worker who's constantly shifting reality and blowing our minds.
Yeah.
And I think when we're in trouble, when we need to change business as usual, we often look to these avatars of demi-reality, these unbelievable figures, because we think that maybe because they're half in reality and half outside of reality somehow, that maybe they are in a spot of leverage. Maybe they could cause change by virtue of the thing that makes them seem cognitively dissonant and in a weird space between the real and the unreal. So, like, what's your overall impression on the potential for half real things to cast a spell on the future?
Totally, totally. And since you brought up Trump, I feel like we can say this now because he's no longer around. So we can kind of like give him credit for, he is masterful at the art of whatever self-fulfilling prophecy, faking it till you make it. I actually just heard this wild, this is quintessential Trump. So apparently, while he was doing The Apprentice, he like his businesses were in shambles. And he basically like used pretending he was this like super successful businessman, like acting the part on the show in order to get his businesses back in order and make a ton of it's nuts. It's amazing. It's like, it's wild. And it's actually a skill to, I mean, he uses it obviously like for his own personal gain and for, very non-pro social reasons, but like it is definitely a skill and a skill to like acknowledge, be in awe of, learn how to wield ourselves. Yeah. So I want to take the opportunity to credit that man with being a masterful, self-fulfilling prophesizer. But as far as, I love how you articulated this, demi-reality and sacred templating. I mean, where I would start in terms of thinking through that is just, like, what is the purpose of knowing anyway? Like, why are we even trying to know what is true? Of course, there is knowledge for its own sake. And also, we want to know what's true in order to do things, right? Like in order to build houses and cure diseases and fulfill our goals, whatever they may be. So what if, under some circumstances, deliberately inaccurate or what I'd call like, purposeful fiction actually helps us achieve our goal better than the nonfiction? Are we going to sacrifice that fiction because it's not ontologically true? Or are we just going to take responsibility for the fact that we're actively co-creating our reality or our demi-reality? And like do some sacred templating, which I think should be considered like a 21st century skill. Hence, so the cheeky tagline, I was going to say, hence the tagline of Deep Reckonings is deep fake it till we make it. And in a way, like fake it till we make it is almost kind of like cheapening the gravity of what's really going on here, which again, is co-creating our demi-reality. And just to kind of like bring that back down to earth a little bit with Deep Reckoning. So the way that the Alex Jones is one of the people who has an imaginary reckoning on Deep Reckonings. And in his video, he is in dialogue with Joe Rogan. And the way that his Deep Reckonings video ends, and this won't spoil it for you, and I still encourage you to go watch it. So he has his reckoning, and then he says to Joe Rogan, he's like, so what do I do with this video? And Joe Rogan is like, well, what do you mean? And Alex Jones says, well, it's fake, but it's true. And Joe Rogan says, well, why don't you just pretend this video is real? And Alex Jones is like, well, like, are you crazy? And Joe Rogan starts laughing because, of course, isn't it hysterical that Alex Jones says it's crazy to pretend that something that's fake is true? And then Joe Rogan is like, well, why don't you just come on my show and do the real one? And Alex Jones is like, oh, well, maybe. And I mean, so the question here, within the context of demi-reality is like, well, what if Alex Jones pretending that his, deep fake reckoning was real is actually what helped him stop broadcasting lies? And not just that, like helped him like bring an enormous group of people along with him. He has enormous influence. He has an enormous audience. It's not just about him. It's like, what if him pretending that this video was real allowed him to do some real helpful work for all of us? Like, would we sacrifice that because, because it's a lie? I mean, we could also just take the placebo effect route and just like have him not be willing to say whether it's fake or real. But again, like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. Like, is it worth it? But I'm at least willing to entertain the question and acknowledge that truth does exist in tension with other values, and in this case, with the value of Alex Jones having a transformation and bringing his entire audience along with him. Like, I'm at least willing to acknowledge that, truth is not the one and only value. And
it's scary. Like there's an anxiety in terms of what would it be like if we weren't so connected to truth. Now, it's not like we're perfectly connected to truth all the time, but we feel like if we deviate from what's true, we're running into a really uncharted, risky territory where we're going to end up with people who we think are, terrible buffoons who live in a fantasy realm of some kind. And yet there's something about that space that puts us in touch with possibilities. One of the things I like. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you finished.
All right. I was just thinking when you were talking about that, I thought, there's like meta communities and meta theories and this, what is meta consciousness? But one of the things you can do with a so-called meta perspective is think about how different layers relate to each other, right? And you're setting up scenarios where, virtual versions recognize that they're virtual versions, but then act like they're real versions. And it confuses what reality is. And in that moment of confusion, when you're not sure, you might be available to make reality a different way. Like, we don't know how much leeway we have over reality, but we can't, whatever leeway we have, we can't take advantage of it when we're locked into one particular sense of what's true. So we have to risk being in that uncomfortable space where whether it's layers interfering with each other or whatever it is, we're just not sure for a second. And maybe that's the opening.
Yes. Yeah. God, there's so much I want to, like, I love this, Layman. I'm so glad that you're able and willing to go here. I guess there's just two things that come up. One is, we're entering like a messy time. But I think that like my kids, for example, are just going to have more axes to work with, in the sense of the only axis will not be true or not true. There will also be helpful and unhelpful. They will know the difference, right? They'll know the difference between what's true and not true. The question is helpful or unhelpful? Am I choosing a helpful truth right now? Or is it an unhelpful truth? Am I choosing a helpful fiction right now that's helping me so I think we will know the difference, and it'll be more about like, under what circumstances do we want to use what in order to achieve what goal. So we're not going to lose the distinction. We're going to have to relax our grasp a little bit right now, and it's going to feel scary and messy. It's already feeling scary and messy. I mean, we're in the scary, messy place. But I think on the other side, and then there's the question of how we, and like will and whatever, and all of the above. It's all going to happen, and it's all happening. But yeah, on the other side, we will have more axes, I guess, to work with. The other a way to make that concrete is that, so the practice of visualization in meditation, the last step of a visualization, you visualize, let's say, whatever, like it can be anything, like having a smooth labor or healing some ailment you have, or whatever it is that you're visualizing, and you're doing that visualization for purposes of affecting your reality. But the last step of the visualization is to come back to the here now. That is the last step, because at the end of the day, the visualization is in service of, and only can be in relation to, the actual reality. So we don't lose sight of that. We can't lose sight of that, because ultimately the fictions, all of these things, have to be in service of and tethered to what is actually going on right here, right now. And we end up developing a different, and I would say even like more resilient and more, I don't know, like creative relationship with reality, when we actually allow ourselves to go to these other places and know that we're in a different place, because then it's not, it's like a less, because we get to be more creative is what I was at the end of the day, Yeah.
It's interesting for me to think about these things, because part of me goes, well, yeah, there's different sets of values, and we need to become more aware of that, right? There's the good, the true, the beautiful, the useful, things like that. Another part of me wants to just think about it as different forms of what truth means. I think about Stephen Colbert's use of the word truthiness, back in the day, a few years ago.
No, I remember.
Right, but that's like what feels true is maybe, and what's true for people in terms of what they need is not always the same as what's factual. And sometimes we like conflate or compress these different meanings of truth into one very solid meaning. I don't know if you're familiar with the French philosopher Alain Badiou, but he has this notion where there's sort of the encyclopedia of the world. There's all the facts, and they mutually confirm each other. But then there are events. And an event is something that introduces a new possibility. A whole new set of potential facts emerges at the site of an event. And then as individuals, we either gamble on whether the event is really part of the facts of the world or not. But that's how you have faith as a subject, is you take a risk in saying that an event is as real as the facts.
Right.
That's his overall historical take. But I like that because he's distinguishing what's true. Like, this is my truth. It's different than these are the facts.
Yeah, and then it seems like there's also a little bit of the helpful, unhelpful distinction there too. It's like, which one is helping me get to where I want to go? Like, I will keep an eye on true or not true, and another eye on like who I want to be and how I want to be.
Now, let me just check in here, because when we were corresponding about doing this, you used the phrase several times, the fractalicious nature of isness. And I want to, are we covering that right now, or is
we're getting there? Yeah, I think we are. I think we actually are. No, the philosopher you just brought up, that's kind of, so maybe, and can I actually start with a story?
Please do.
That might help us get there. So once upon a time, I was taking a soil science class in grad school, and I did a research paper on the phenomenon of geophagy. Do you know what geophagy is?
Sounds like it's people who eat dirt.
Yes. Wow, you're Latin. I'm impressed. So it's basically the practice of eating soil. So throughout history, Native Americans ate soil. They mixed soil into the acorn meal in order to detoxify the tannins in the acorns and also thereby get minerals and nutrients from the soil. And we actually eat soil too, but we don't think about it that way because we dress it up in things that we call vitamins and minerals. But anyway, so Native Americans practiced geophagy, but what I found in doing my soil science paper research is in the scientific literature was basically what I found was like, wow, can you believe that Native Americans were doing something that made sense? Like, we proved that eating soil makes sense. Like, we proved that geophagy makes sense. And it's like, but wait, did we really prove that geophagy made sense? No, geophagy had already made sense to the people who were practicing it for hundreds of thousands of years. All we proved was that we were able to understand geophagy through our own scientific materialist way of knowing. And so I ended up writing my research paper about the arrogance of Western science in its treatment of geophagy, which my soil science professor did not whatsoever appreciate. But the point is, Native Americans obviously had a way to know without Western science. And so where I'm getting at with the fractalicious nature of isness, that the idea there is that what is manifests itself at multiple levels of organization. So we don't necessarily need to know soil science or like look at soil through a microscope in order to consume minerals and nutrients, know that it might be beneficial. to consume minerals and nutrients from the soil. And this one might get me into trouble, but we may not even need to know, or at least all need to know, climate science in order to take climate action, because the climate crisis is already manifesting itself, not just in our climate, which we can't necessarily like know without certain tools, but it's manifesting itself, thanks to the fractalicious nature of isness, in our lungs and our gardens and our farms and floods and fires and wars, and at all these other levels of organization that we can readily perceive and act on. And so, if I, maybe I'll just, like, there's this question I hear of like, how could we have possibly known, like the automobile, taking the climate crisis, like, how could we have possibly known that the automobile was going to lead to, I actually believe, and this is maybe a blasphemous belief, I believe we could have known. Because I think the manifestation of what was to come was already available to our senses at other levels of organization. And can I give one more story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And because I really want to thank you for letting me just get this out. I haven't talked to anyone. So you heard it here first. I haven't really talked about this. So there's this amazing story about foie gras. So foie gras originated in Egypt within the context of slavery. And what was going on there was that, so foie gras was like had historically been just a naturally occurring food. It just so happens that when geese are preparing for the winter, they gorge themselves with dry leaves, and then their livers taste really good. And the Pharaoh basically said, like, this is so good, I want you to figure out how to get this to me all year round. And so I might be telling the story in the wrong order, actually. Wait, let me think if I should tell it in a different order. No, I can keep going. Okay. Sorry, Layman. So yeah, so basically the Pharaoh said to the slaves, this is so good, I want you to figure out how to get this to me all year round. So what the slaves had to do was force feed dry leaves to geese, which is not really very fun, right? It must not feel very good to be force feeding animals something that they don't want in order to create this food that would otherwise be naturally occurring. So the story goes, there's this farmer in France, and he only produces like naturally occurring foie gras. He like lets his geese eat whatever they want and just produces the foie gras in the fall, which is when they would normally eat the dry leaves. So he enters his foie gras into this, like, it's like the Olympics for food. Nobody knows. This wasn't like a sustainable food Olympics. It's just like which foie gras tastes the best, right? Nobody knows how it was produced. All they're judging it is, all they're basing their judgment on is like whatever, like the taste of it. And his foie gras has won, like, I think like multiple years in a row, which to me indicates like we can actually taste what is good, literally, like at all levels of organization, like literally on our taste buds. And the reason that this is blasphemous, obviously, is because other people will be like, well, that's crazy. Like, you can't just base, an entire, like, based on whether some judge, it's like, what had he drunk, or can they really tell, or whatever. But like, I actually believe we are capable of perceiving. And I mean, and this says something not just about what we are capable of knowing, but also it says something about the nature of reality. Like, if you've ever said the words, it's all interconnected, it's like, do you really believe that? Because if you do, then it actually is. And then it means that we are capable of knowing all kinds of things that you wouldn't think we're capable of knowing, because, like, I didn't see it through a microscope, or I didn't see it through a telescope. Well, maybe, guess what? Maybe it's still manifesting itself at all levels of organization and through time in ways that allow you to know things, and maybe not even know them consciously, but know them enough to act on them, which is what this is really about. And sorry, just one last thing on this. Like, it doesn't, thank you. this is like this is like philosophy therapy, like letting me get some thoughts out that I haven't been able to get out. This doesn't mean we're all capable of knowing everything, right? Like some things are unknowable, some things are uncertain, yada, yada, yada. What it means is that we're capable of knowing something that's very specific and very important, which is the extent to which something is or is not a systemic solution. Or like a synergistic satisfier, which the automobile was not. Okay. And foie gras made within the context of slavery is not. But foie gras made natural is, right? It just allows us to know, yeah, whether something is like helping us or like equitable or just at all levels of organization, because that's the only way that something even should be called a solution anyway, right? Like otherwise it's just a band-aid that's chasing the problem somewhere else in the system. So yeah, I guess the fractalicious nature of isness, just to bring it all together, is just my way of articulating the fact that what is manifests itself at all levels of organizations in a way that enables us to perceive whether something should be considered I'll just say, solution or not.
Yeah, it's a very interesting space in terms of thinking about what we know that we don't know that we know, right? So then there's some people who sort of err on the side of thinking that, you know, you could become an omniscient sage and we can intuitively have access to all possible information. And then there's other people who would err on the side of, well, yes, we have subconscious heuristic knowledge relative to the types of situations that we evolved under, but it might not apply to situations that are weird for us. Like we have a good instinct in the woods, but we have terrible instincts about airplanes because we had no experience of airplanes in order to develop that from. So somewhere between those two is the unknown range of what we actually could act on that we might not know. And we have no real idea what that limit is. But if we think in terms of the computational patterns of the universe, we're very familiar with a lot of those computational styles, and they might be very broadly applicable. And we might, out of sheer evolutionary necessity, have a very fine-tuned instinct for what types of patterns work well together to generate well-being in general.
Well, I would say it's not even a pattern, and maybe I didn't make this clear enough. The point is foie gras required slavery.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. In order to make it, people had to be subjugated because there was no other way. If you were friends with someone, they'd be like, hell no, I'm not going to do that horrible thing to geese. That sucks. It required slavery in order to produce. And we can taste that. I don't taste it. I mean, that's the point.
Taste the slavery.
Well, the point is more like what has building the automobile required that, like, if you were going to just look at what's coming out of the tailpipe or something, like, we wouldn't have known. But if you just saw the way that it was, like, all the other manifestations of it at all the levels of organization, you could have been like, oh yeah, this is bad news. That's more what I mean. Like, we don't even need to be reading any patterns. We can literally just be looking at, like, the thing that is right in front of us that we can very, very
I would
perceive.
In my own phrasing, I would look at that as a kind of pattern reading, right? Like,
okay.
I sort of think that we have a role in the production of naturalness in a way. Like there's the way nature does things, and then there's sort of human systems, and where those kind of map into each other properly, we get this hybrid effect that we go, oh, natural. Not just all the awful stuff about nature, all the awful stuff about us, but a place where it works really well together. And that's a set of styles of patterns. And we're like, oh, those styles of patterns work really well, and they solve problems we didn't even know we had. And all the other patterns tend to lead to more problematic outcomes down the line when you start to use them. Right.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at the automobile and you're like, well, it solves a couple of problems. Okay, that's good. But Sure, it smells like poison, looks very blocky, sounds awful. You start to be like, it's not really hitting that sweet spot where you go, oh, the patterns are really working well together on
Yeah.
this one. It's like, that's one of those
Which,
dangerous setups.
yeah, totally. Which is why I actually wouldn't like totally make fun of truthiness as a concept. Like, I think truthiness is totally legit. I think truthiness, like, what Steve Colbert is, like, I think sometimes truthiness is all we need, right? It's like on a need to know basis, because ultimately it's about knowing in order to do. Again, all about knowledge for its own sake. Knowledge is beautiful, and in a way, it's like its own art form. And also, like, we're trying to get some things done here. So if like all it takes is the pattern, the recognition of the pattern to like get us what we need to know in order. I also want to like say for the listeners who are still with us, I am holding this also like a little lightly. Like, I've just been sitting with this, the fractalicious nature of isness, for over a decade now, and honestly have been like scared to talk about it because it is a little, it's like, well, what do you mean in science and this and that and no billion, like you know exactly where it's all going to go. And so I hold it all, and I am also holding it lightly. Like, I don't know that it doesn't obviously apply to like all knowledge about all things, or not all kinds of knowledge. It's just like, that's why I want to specify it's about maybe it's about just being able to tell whether something is a systemic solution or not. I haven't totally worked that out. I'm just like playing that out right now. I'm playing with it. But there, I feel like there is something here in the sense of like, I joke, like, what's going to happen when we need to prove that clean water is important? Oh shit, we're already there. That is dangerous. That is a dangerous place for Homo sapiens to be, to need to prove that clean water is important. There are some things that should be self-evident or should be readily perceivable. Existence would not exist, right? We, if there were, if like, so it's that, it's like, I have, yeah, a part of it is a faith in like the nature of reality to make certain things self-evident, certain like existential things self-evident. Part of it is that. Part of it is also like an understanding, and now it's funny that I'm even about to say this, but it's like somewhat of an understanding of like our scientific understanding about the nature of reality, that which is where like it's all connected comes from, because it is like on some level it is. And so therefore what are the epistemological implications of that, if that makes
How do
sense?
we go about, well, in this kind of reality that you're discussing, it's interesting to think what the next steps in terms of making sense of it are. Like, when are people's intuitive capacities to know things as self-evident more correct or less correct? Or, the Colbert thing is interesting in an integral context, let's say, because one of the things he means by truthiness might mean that it works out really well within the systemic context of a particular approach to society, right? Or, that the people who have these conservative traditional values that he was parodying on that show have a sense of what works well, but maybe it only works well within the world space that they conceive. And if you look at it from a larger world space, you go, oh, actually, that causes a ton of problems that you guys just don't notice and don't care about. So
Uh-huh.
there's that sense of what is the environment in which it's applicable and how good are we at doing it?
Yes.
And I mean, in a way, the argument for ongoing conscious rational knowledge is we just don't know where are the things we don't know are applicable or where they aren't. So we constantly have to be guessing and testing and experimenting. But hopefully what that's going to tell us is more and more about where those things are totally applicable, but also challenge us about areas where they might not be applicable.
Yes. What I would say is, I do think where it's applicable is in this kind of, like this question of this thing about like we could not have foreseen the negative externalities or the unintended consequences. I think because of the nature of reality, I think we can, and we should, and a lot of it is, and therefore, as part of evolving our epistemology for the 21st century, like just being sensitive and receptive to the reality in front of us is an essential part of that, which maybe sounds really obvious, but I would like, just to kind of like play with that a little bit, like here's like so you're familiar with Dinel's 12 leverage points for intervening in a system. And so what I often hear in a lot of conversations is like, you always go to the highest leverage point, right? Like if you actually want to intervene in the system, why are you gonna mess around with all those like smaller leverage? Like, you know, you got to change the whatever the 12th one, like the paradigm for, you know, understanding the system, like the goal of the system. I don't remember what the 12th one is. However, you know, the lower ones are easier to push on. That's what makes them lower, is they're, you know, they have less leverage, but they're also easier to press, which is why we call them band-aids. But the band-aids can be really helpful. It's like you take some painkillers and put on some band-aids while you work on the root cause. And so the way that I've thought about it is like, you actually kind of want to play a chord, right? You want to like think of it as a set of piano keys. And you want to have some lower ones and medium ones and some higher ones, so you can kind of like get the thing, like just stabilize the thing while you work on the root cause. The way that we know, just to take this analogy further, that it's like working out in a way that we can like readily perceive, taking into account the fractalicious nature of isness, is if the chord sounds good, if the foie gras tastes good.
Yeah, I think that's sort of it's an overlooked element when people think about values, right? Even if they do a simple grouping of values like the good, the true, and the beautiful, like, okay, we value the good, the true, and the beautiful, but how do we tell that anything is good or true or beautiful? It's got some kind of structural component that makes it easy for us to appreciate, whether we're appreciating it cognitively or aesthetically or ethically or something like that. It has this I don't know, this architectural element is how it seems to me, where we go, oh yeah, that checks out. That's robust. That's well made in the certain way that I've evolved for 100 million years to know that something is well made. And I don't have to understand how it's well made. I just have to recognize that kind of a thing, because that kind of thing solves more problems than I'm aware of.
Well, and it has to do with where I'm at now, because let's take peanut butter as an example. I think we all know what it's like to like shitty peanut butter. And we all know, I know what it's like when shitty peanut butter tastes good. It's been a long time, like Jiffy. And I know what it's like when like natural peanut butter tastes good. Like I've had both experiences where both taste good so that I can compare them. And I know the difference between shitty peanut butter tasting good to me and like healthy peanut butter tasting good to me. And healthy peanut butter tasting good to me feels way better. So I can say, like, it's not just about the thing. It's about like where I am in my life and how I'm doing and how healthy I am. And that makes the healthy peanut butter tasting good taste better than the shitty peanut butter tasting good.
That's something I really love, which is the variability and hopefully the developmental variability in our capacity to recognize and work with these things. Because I think a lot of people have a very homogenous perspective where either in general our unproven instincts are crap, or in general our unproven instincts, however they happen to be, are spot on and we should just act from them. And what neither of those take into account is that we can get better at it. Right? It's not just that we cognitively develop through stages in the front of our mind in terms of what we think we know about the structure of the world. It's that our subconscious heuristic way of being can also grow and change and develop. And we can live in a way that helps helps the part of us we don't know about get smarter. And one of the ways is we give it experiences, we give it comparisons, we give it emotions and sensory experience, and we feed it things and it gets smarter. So then we can trust it more and more without being dummies.
Which is why, I mean, you basically just articulated like why I was interested in, for 4 years, talking to former white supremacists and people who've radically evolved their worldview, like political worldviews and all kinds, because they've been fed, they've had these kinds of experiences. They know what it feels like to feel like white supremacy is right. And they know what it feels like to feel like white supremacy is not right. Or what, I mean, I'm not framing it that very like articulately, but point is they know what it's, you know, they know what it's like to think shitty peanut butter tastes good and to think good peanut butter tastes good. And so they can compare. Yeah. And the kinds of wisdom that people come to just by virtue of watching themselves change or watching themselves think that different things are right. Yeah. And therefore change not just their views, but their relationship with their views. It gives me so much hope, because they didn't read this thing in a book, and and it's like we can do so much through just personal experience. Thank God.
I think that's one of the big missed pieces in how we think about social health and social development, because we often treat the superficial acknowledgement of facts as if that was enough for you to be at a certain place, right? We go, oh, we told you that everybody agrees now that the world is round. You're like, yeah, you told us, but you didn't really help us. We didn't get to that spot where we went, oh, that's why it's definitely a sphere and not flat. We didn't have that experience. We were just told something. So maybe we'll go back to a flat earth. Doesn't matter. You never really helped us have the experience. Yeah. So society fills up with people who are nominally participating in our civilization, but we didn't actually help them join at all.
Totally. My favorite assignment in school ever of my whole life was senior year of high school. Our physics teacher had us discover the moon. She just said, all you have is a compass and a protractor, and just observe and figure out how it works. I don't even know if Wikipedia existed. I mean, I'm dating myself. Like, I definitely wasn't really using the internet. Like, but even if I could, I mean, obviously I could have, I mean, there were books before the internet, FYI, everyone. But the point was like, don't go looking anywhere. Don't go reading anything. Like, take a compass, a protractor, your eyes, and a month, and figure out how the moon works. And I did. I figured it out. I was making all these diagrams, waking up at really weird hours. Like, when does it rise? When does it set? Where's the sun? What's going on? And now it is something I will never forget, because I discovered it on my own. I think that is an essential experience to have, because that human development piece. Like, when you think about, if you read anything in like the history of math and geometry and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, guys were basically figuring out calculus with no paper, with like rocks and sticks. How did they do that? But it must have been so real, so deep, so human when they did it, in a way that telling some 8-year-olds and giving them a calculator doesn't really pull that off. And then we also have this, I don't know what your experience is. I've sat with a number of human beings who 90% of what they're saying sounds like bullshit to me, but they're clearly more of a person than I am, right? Their presence, their being, their radiance is overwhelming. I wish I could get to the level that they're at. And I wish, and that would be fine if what I was saying at that level was some completely non-factual bullshit of my own that was analogous to theirs. It wouldn't be the same. It would be mine. But when I'm sitting with them, I'm like, you are more developed than anything to talk about or say. And that is really strange. It's like the part of them that grew past normal isn't the part that has the knowledge about the world. Their knowledge about the world could even be subhuman in some cases. And you still go, no, that's a higher human being. I just like to be in the same building as this person. It's amazing. You're very radiant, Layman. I wouldn't sell yourself short there.
Okay. It's just the lighting.
Radiant lighting. Just to tie up, I feel like I want to just close especially because I've never, I don't know if that was the fractalicious nature of isness was like particularly followable, but the where I would land with that as far as like, and therefore what, like, so what? The so what is in like Facebook is a great example. Is like Mark Zuckerberg being like, we could have never predicted. Okay, so I think that is inaccurate. But in order to predict, given the fractalicious nature of isness, the way that you predict, the way that you know what externalities your thing is going to have, or the way, if you know whether it's a synergistic satisfier, or know whether it's a systemic solution or not, is you get people who are present, or organisms or beings or whatever, at the different levels of organization into the room as like your counsel for predicting or like envisioning what could possibly happen with this thing. And then it's not like, oh, we could have never known because it happened 20 years later. It's like, no, you just need to get all of the levels of organization represented in the room, and then trust that the fractalicious nature of isness will tell you what you need to know.
If we were harnessing collective intelligence in a smart and deep way, then we could respond to things in the world with much greater awareness and intelligence.
Yeah, and maybe this is maybe that's like a way to think about what collective intelligence even is it's just paying attention to the fractalicious nature of isness. And collective means like not just people, let's say, but like all perceiving beings and instruments.
Okay, so there's a possible segue here into thinking about masculine and feminine.
Taking a bathroom break.
do you need one?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, why don't we? And then. Well, thank you, Bruce.
We'll see. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you're editing this, Bruce, edit this comment out, but thank you.
Well, no, keep the thank you. We really want to appreciate you, Bruce. Yeah.
Masculine and feminine.
Masculine and feminine.
Okay, as I understand it, every fetus basically starts female, and the mother's body applies androgenic chemicals to some of them, which causes these micro girls to be distorted in certain ways, right? They become like the ovaries and the clitoris are extruded from the body, made more obvious, and the brain gets more myelinated sheathing. And there's a sense in which there's a simplifying and a narrowing to some degree, so that when they do studies on the brains of adults in combat, the trauma spreads through the female brains much more readily than through the male brains. The male brains are better able to contain the trauma in some areas because they're a little bit more locked down and they're a little bit narrow, and they don't let the information go everywhere as readily. Right. So this process leads to a certain different statistical outcome in the sensibilities, right? Where we'd say, hey, it's maybe a little bit more feminine to think about the fractalicious holographic web of all kinds of being, and the male specialized units would go, no, I want to lock down some fact tools so I can have a righteous and somewhat self-sacrificial result. I just got to work on this because this is really a super efficient way to get things done.
Multiple ingredients. I'm into it. Yeah.
And I'm curious what your take on that is, because, I was thinking a little bit when your talk with Jim, and I appreciated everything Jim did. I like Jim a lot, but he really sort of stood up for getting aggressively, righteously upset about unfair accusations, and I feel that myself, but I also see the ways in which that's a classically Jung style, where you want to narrow in and go, this was the fact or not.
Yeah.
And depending on whether or not it's the fact, then I wasn't going to
talk to him about
really
the
upset or not.
Nature of business.
And then there's this maybe more feminine style of, well, let's let's think about the web and the weave and take society and a bunch of different elements and how we're interacting with each other into account. To what degree do you think you're, sort of embodying a classically feminine take on these things, maybe?
Yeah. Are we on separate
Let's have a
tracks?
better conversation versus what's right and true.
Yeah. Actually, to Jim's credit, he cares more about what's helpful and unhelpful. He's a very strategic thinker.
Yeah, Jim's great.
So it's honestly, it's like whatever, he's very much on the like whatever's going to get you where you need to go. I think he just has never he hasn't found that many, like, I wouldn't talk to him about the fractalicious nature of isness. Actually, I would, and I think I actually would, because if he saw the utility, I think he would get on board. The question is the utility. It's got to actually be useful. But your question is, to what extent do I think that my thinking about the fractalicious nature of isness is an expression of my femininity? Is that?
Yeah, as well as in the kinds of projects you're working on, right? Hey, let's have dialogues. Let's make this personal. Let's not worry as much about what the true facts were as we are about the social dimension of the exchange. What do we want to hear from each other? It seems to me there's a little bit of a archetypal feminine masculine duality there, and I was just curious whether you think that's true or not.
I think I'm actually responding more to the moment. I feel than I am like coming from a feminine place, because I don't know, maybe this is just the way I like to see it, but I do feel like I am very much at the intersection right there. Like, definitely reckonings is, I mean, the question is, how do people change in ways that connect to or scale into broader social and political change? It's really about the relationship between personal and social change, or between the inner and outer dimension, or thinking about the 4 quadrants. Like, what is the inner dimension of, like, I feel like I'm kind of at the intersection there, I guess. Like, it's not like I'm interested in just like how people like personally resolve like the death of a loved one. It's like, what internal changes does someone have to go through in order to not be a white supremacist? I actually really enjoy and am most interested in the interface there. So, but maybe being interested in the interface is also quintessentially feminine.
Yeah, I'm not sure about any of this. I have a vague impulse to sort of dig into this area. And I mean, it's probably based on a lot of my own life. And like when I'm looking at the kids in the house, the boy is definitely much more pensively concerned about fairness. And I think about that relative to myself and relative to the possibility of undergoing reckonings and acknowledgments, right? And what it takes. You go, well, if it's not fair, right? If they didn't say it right, or that's not a real accusation, or blah, 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 right? All these reasons, you go, well, that's not fair. And therefore, I'm not really going to acknowledge anything here because that wasn't true or that wasn't fair, versus thinking that somehow in the dialogical exchange, something really valuable will be produced. I think it's possibly a masculine tendency to withdraw from the transformative dialogue under the conditions of thinking something isn't true or vetted or fair.
Yeah, right. Whereas, do you see something like a different impulse from your daughters?
I don't, they're not any more or less emotional in response, but I think they aren't as, and maybe I don't see it as much because I probably see the things that I understand because I went through them.
Yeah.
But there's like a cold conclusion of injustice that has nothing to do with how it works out or who gets cared for. It's just that was unjust. And I'm willing to even sacrifice the well-being that I would get from entering more deeply into relationship or transformation because of the
Right.
injustice.
Right. I don't think that's limited to, I don't know if that's even like gender. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know either.
but what's
No,
an
and also I
example?
want to specify here that when I say masculine and feminine, I don't mean males and females
Yeah,
necessarily.
yeah.
Yeah, like we've all got the modes.
Is there an example from Jim that
No, I don't.
not
It's
to
not that
pick
Jim
on
had
him,
an
but
example. It's
it
that
might
your
be a good
conversation with Jim made me start thinking about this.
okay.
And when Jim said, you were saying about the Supreme Court guy,
Kavanaugh.
yeah, Kavanaugh, that it doesn't really matter from your project whether he did the things he's accused of or not. We can't know that.
Yeah.
And that's not really the issue that you're working on. You're working on what would either transform him or be useful to all of us to see him bring forward. So there's these very personal and relational dynamics to it. And Jim said, well, yeah, but if it's not true and somebody accuses you of a thing that isn't true, then you should get fucking angry and denounce them. Right. And that's a very old school, very classic thing. I relate to it myself.
Totally.
And it made me start thinking about, what maybe we don't even want to call it male and female, but a slight thematic distinction in how people relate to these topics.
Yes. Here, so all of the above is the short answer. Obviously, you could have predicted that. Response. I mean, I guess the longer response is under some circumstances, it behooves us to have, I think, a stricter sense of true and not true. I mean, that's actually the way our legal system operates and has to, for obvious reasons. Like, it happened, it didn't. Did you murder the person? Did you not? Like under some circumstances, we can do that, and we need to do that, and doing that is helpful. And I think under other circumstances, we can relax our grip on that. So really kind of all of the above. I mean, I think that's also kind of like, that's kind of where I feel like we're heading right now with race, with gender. Like under some circumstances, race exists for purposes of reparations, affirmative action. Yeah. Race exists. Once we want to like tap into our shared humanity, we let go. So we use these, and then the Jim question maybe or whatever would be like, but aren't they real? They are real, right? And it's like, I'm still not even sure if I don't yet have an answer to that one. Like,
yeah, there's an unclear area here.
Yeah,
about whether or not this kind of typological polarization
I guess it just becomes less important. It's like you can, if you want to take your fancy microscopes and telescopes and tools and figure out whether it's really, really, really real or not. Yeah. I'm so curious what you're going to find. You're probably going to end up somewhere super string theory, quantum. You're going to end up somewhere like looping in your brain. Like, have fun, and let me know where you end up. We'll like, while you're doing that, we'll be operating as if it's real when that's useful, and letting go of it when we don't need it.
Maybe a different way to think about it, rather than masculine, feminine, is sort of particular and relational versus abstract and universal. Because like, do Black lives matter or do all lives matter? And so one way is to say, hey, this particular version of reality in relationship between these different groups really tells us something important about what we have to acknowledge and go through right now. Mm-hmm. The other one is, no, technically, that's a useless thing to say because it's already specified by the fact that they're people and they're included in people and people matter. Uh-huh. You go, well, that's accurate. That's technically true. You're not wrong. Mm-hmm. Right. And there's risks you take both ways, but there's two different styles of approaching the situation with concomitant risks that go along with those styles.
Yeah. And there's the question of what we're trying to do here. What are we trying to achieve here? What moment are we in? Right now we're in a Black Lives Matter moment. So, and like, it doesn't mean that other people don't matter. Like, it's Yeah, I guess I just have a more, in that sense, I don't know if this is less feminine, or I know you've like shifted the frame to more relational. In that sense, I'm very strategic. Like I'm actually a strategist, kind of at heart a little bit. It's really like, what do we need in order to do what we're trying to do? You know, and so I don't have to be as concerned, I guess, with like the absolutes about it.
We're gonna weave this back onto some kind of track here. You know, I don't know. I'm There's something that makes me curious about race relations as a site of reckoning, right? There's this
Oh.
sort of idea that maybe all people of a particular group, maybe all the white people or all the white men want to undergo a reckoning. And then there's a sense in which they want to say, well, no, I didn't do those things, or that's not fair, or everybody has to go through a reckoning. And these are quite possibly true things, but you go, well, it's not really about truth. It's about your opportunity to go through this reckoning right now and how it might be good for you and good for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But then the holdup there might be like they might be expressing something about their relationship to truth or fairness is somehow the very thing that's right. They're not hearing, there's something they're not hearing, which would say to them, it's okay to do that. And people are saying, hey, do this. This is important. And they're going, yeah, I'm not hearing the thing that says I can do this. I'm hearing a challenge, and I've got to stand my ground against that challenge unless I hear that other thing. But what is that other thing?
The other thing is, I mean, Brett Kavanaugh said, the imaginary Brett Kavanaugh says it really beautifully. The other thing is evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty. The other thing is there's a bigger process, evolutionary process of social progress that we're going to get on board with. The other thing is like, you're alive right now. Now is the moment that we're attending to. So like, sorry, it's not a blank canvas to paint on, but like, congratulations, you still get to paint on it. But the truth is there hasn't been that acknowledgement. You're right. The way it's been framed is like you. So yeah, I do think, I mean, I think the imaginary Kavanaugh says it really, really well. Because yeah, it's bigger than us, than like any of us. I mean, and thank God too, like it's not all up to us. So yeah, you know, we get to come in with our own kind of like personal flavors and ways of doing things and sentiments and styles. And also like, I actually like there is a reality in front of us. Sure. I'll say it that way. Even if we're co-creating, and we are co-creating it. There's a demi-reality in front of us that we are co-creating.
No, I love the Kavanaugh one, partly because of that evolution quote, and it got repeated in there. That was really good. But I think the beautiful part of that, yeah, that's the tagline.
It's like CNN, evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty.
Breaking news.
Yeah, totally. It's like scrolling. Yeah.
Scientists have just determined.
Oh my God, I love
it. The beautiful thing that where he sort of says, look, it's not really, it's not about what I did necessarily. It's about this. Can I acknowledge that this has been bad for someone else? Right. And that's not taking one stand or another based on my own guilt. It's about entering into a relationship with society and other people in a new way. Yeah. And I think that's really crucial. And that's that's what a really good PR agent would be able to tell some of these people, but they so seldom have that good PR agent. Right.
I'm open for business. Seriously. No, Layman, you're totally right. That's another piece that I think has also not been, it's part of the like helping people go from the world is flat to the world is round, is the like, but don't you actually care how you affect people?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, how would you feel about your hookup if she went home and told her friends she had a super shitty time with you? Like, that sucks, right? So that, yeah, there is like to me, honestly, that's kind of like the missing piece in like this whole thing around cancel culture too, is like, it is caring about the other person. It's really as simple as that. Is like, are we, you know, how it's not like, is cancel culture real, not real, good, bad? It's like, how can we hold each other publicly accountable in a way that enables us to learn and grow, i.e., how to actually help each other, like as if we care about each other, help each other grow.
Seems
The
like
caring
there's
about the other
two.
person is the missing piece there.
You know, I was thinking of sociopaths, right? Somebody who might have a deficiency whereby they couldn't care about other people. Is there something about this that they could still understand? And I think there's an element of it, like part of it is the caring and the ethical opportunity that's available. And the other part is, I think, a more and more obvious social strategy of owning things and leaning into them, right? I don't know if you ever saw Letterman's confession on his old show.
No.
Okay, so he came on at the beginning of his show. I remember seeing this as a kid because it was Letterman was repeated at 4 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. I would watch it after school. And he said, like, look, I was getting these packages from this guy who said, I know about all the terrible things you've done, and I'm going to tell people and put them in this screenplay, and I want all this money. And so, but Letterman's like, he's just telling everyone. He's like, yeah, and so I did do some terrible things, and he said I had sexual relations with all these women I worked for. And yeah, I did that. I'm a creepy guy, and but this guy was trying to blackmail me, and I couldn't let that go. And so he's walking through the thing. He does this 10-minute explanation at the beginning of his show, and he's getting laughs. Like he's got the audience with him. He's confessing the thing that he was going to get blackmailed about. He's getting laughs.
Yeah.
He's doing it in an interesting way. The blackmailer is the villain.
Yeah.
And at the end of the thing, he just sort of, that's it. He's wrapped it up. It's probably
real?
The first time you've ever heard from. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then they come back after commercial and the show goes on. But I remember thinking, that's amazing. Like,
totally.
He didn't necessarily exhibit a lot of compassion for people who might be involved. There wasn't really an apology or anything like that, but still he owned it and he leaned into it, and he didn't deny or marginalize. He tried to creatively enter and take possession of the thing that was being pushed at him from other people.
Totally.
And that was really interesting.
I mean, I joke I'm open for business, but like, I think there are so many missed opportunities. Louis C.K., that would be an amazing comedy sketch of like bitingly self-critical and absolutely hilarious. And we all need to hear it. Yeah.
I don't know if you read his letter right after the events and then saw his show from last year. Like he touches it in a number of ways, and they're pretty good, but they're insufficient. They don't give us what we need to hear.
And they could be so good. Imagine the redone Justin Timberlake, Janet Jackson dance as a song that he writes to her. Yes.
There's so many opportunities.
Bring it on.
Here.
Yeah. I think because it's a skill. Like when you see someone owning their shit, it's actually really beautiful. Yeah. And because it's not groveling, it's not like being mired in self-pity. That thing is not beautiful. It's neither denial and deflection, not beautiful, not helpful, nor groveling and getting mired in self-pity, because that's also not beautiful and not helpful, because it's like all about you. Like if you're actually oriented again around, you're caring for the other person and you're actually like making a genuine attempt to repair the harm, something beautiful is going to happen, and we all need to see it. Yeah, or not all. I mean, not all need to have it in public. The ones involving public figures, or where there's some public.
Yeah, they're already in public. That's where
a lot of it is already in public too. That's also true.
I'm coming back in my mind to these two halves, right? The care half and the tactics half.
Yeah.
I saw a PBS documentary about Bill Clinton years ago, and they spoke to some of his advisors, and one guy said, when the Monica Lewinsky thing happened, Bill's instinct was to confess it on national TV, and we told him no. We ran it by a focus group. We determined it was the wrong thing to do, but his initial instinct was to come forward with all of it. But that's on the technical side. It doesn't necessarily have any compassion to it.
I'm going to throw out something that I also have not really talked about at all. You're just bringing all my little blasphemous ideas out. So on the care side, like it's like, yeah, we should all care, and that's the missing piece. And if only we would care, we would say the right thing. And then your mind goes to sociopaths, and it's like, what about people who don't care, and what do we do about that? And like, it just sounds so easy to be like, why don't we care? And if only we cared. I mean, I think there's the other another motivation, let's say, that isn't just like appealing to people's like better angels, assuming those better angels are like at the forefront, ready to own their shit, is is like it's actually more enjoyable. Okay, I'm going to give a very specific example here. We're appealing to people's desire to have a good time because, for example, within the context of sex and sexual relations, it's like if you are abusing your power sexually, if you're like, and I don't mean like violently, but like if you're let's just take like a heterosexual encounter between two college students, and the dude is like just like being a little like extra aggressive and trying to front and like kind of like putting the girl's hand on, it's like doing the thing, or like pushing her head down or whatever. Like you're basically in that context, and just like generally, you're like really actually missing out on the awesomeness of that person. You're really missing out. Like you could be probably having a lot more fun if you, like, I like don't totally know how to articulate this because I've never really said this, but yeah, if you gave the person a little more freedom, or like had a little less ego involved, or like were less trying to power trip, like you would be experiencing like so much more awesomeness from so many more people.
There's a thing you're like, so still bracketing the care part, which we should come back to.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the enjoyment part, right, there's certain kinds of mutual and organic and authentic pleasures that people cut themselves off from by the way that they interact with each other. But underlying that, one of the things I often think about is like the self-esteem issue. Does that person think they deserve a quality of experience that's better than the one they're getting, right? Or you could say like, look, it would actually feel better, and they could agree with you, but emotionally inside, they're like, they actually don't think they're not comfortable feeling better.
Liking the shitty peanut butter and liking the healthy peanut butter. They think they like the shitty one until they like get to a place where they like the healthy one, and they're like, oh, the shitty one. And I can tell the difference between liking both. I'm going to give another example. So right now, because like CEOs or whatever, like companies are tethered to maximizing short-term profit, they have to like, it's like once upon a time an entrepreneur had an idea about a problem that they whatever were really excited to solve. It's like, I really want to solve this problem, whatever it was, search or whatever it is. And so they started this company to solve this problem that they really care about. But because of the nature of American ruthless capitalism, the problem that they've like started to solve is like how to like squeeze every last penny out of every employee. So they're using these algorithmic scheduling systems in order to like only get employees into the stores when they can, it's like cut their costs. Like, but like, is that fun? Is that the problem that you really want to be solving? Like how to squeeze every like that, or no, here's an even less fun problem, is like hiring the right lobbyists to get the government to make the context for your business, so that you end up making more. But it's like, does that fun? Like, wouldn't you have more fun solving problems that are more interesting and fun to solve than the problem of finding the right lobbying firm? So I think there is something here that like I haven't like worked out, but there's something of an incentive around like yeah, sure, like enjoying the healthy peanut butter is more enjoyable. I obviously haven't like packaged it yet, but that could be the incentive that's not just like because you should care.
Yeah. Well, there's the care element, and then there's the improved quality of experience element.
But maybe those are connected per the fractalicious nature of isness. They shouldn't actually be disconnected. Like the better foie gras should taste better.
Yes.
Yes.
No, and I think that's what people miss often is that ethics is a long-term strategy for maximizing pleasure.
I love that. Thank you. Is that something that has been said before? I've never heard that.
I don't know. I've never. That's just how I think about it.
That's great.
I sort of build it off of like when I read Nassim Taleb's stuff, I get the impression that what he's trying to say about, like in his mind, honesty is a cunning ancient strategy for adapting profitably to informational opacity in a complex universe. So like I have to summarize that for myself. So basically,
yeah.
Because honesty is not necessarily a good short-term strategy. You could get results from a lie, but over many interactions, and Jordan Peterson thinks this way as well, over a series of many game interactions, it may be a great strategy, especially given that you don't know how things will work out.
Yeah. Well, and we're in this messy, like, are we transitioning from game A to game B? So it's just like a weird time. It's like you kind of have to hedge with honesty a little bit, but just like, but just know that ethics is, what did you call it? A long-term strategy for pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes. Amen.
It's advanced hedonism.
but
like that's Kierkegaard's argument as well, I think.
Yeah, and as it should be. I mean, thank God. Otherwise, it would be really confusing, and we would really have to like figure everything out, which is the way that we're thinking about it now. Kind of.
We're also in an increasingly massively mediated age where everybody has to take the reactions of swarms of strangers into account, right? Like if something goes online, everyone from the world could just look at it and react to it. A bunch of them are going to hate it. And a lot of that hatred can mobilize into a narrative. And that narrative might be justified or it might be unjustified, but like this collective shadow emerges, right? And when you see the politicians you hope would win the election sidelined by some weird mood about them that's emerged from the population, you think, why didn't you know how to take over that shadow? Yeah. Like whether you were guilty of anything or not, why don't you know what seems to be a basic skill for living in the digital global future, which is how do you own your social shadow somehow?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I keep joking that I'm open for business to help people script their, okay. First thing is just to say, like, just thank you for showing me how much I've grown. That could be a place to start. Now, if I were to like take that further, as like this is like kind of absurd, but like not totally. So Facebook memories, where Facebook will like introduce to you periodic like picture, it's like term. Okay, so let's say you combine, and then have you heard this term receipts?
No.
So apparently when you're canceled online, it's like everyone goes digging through your Twitter feed to like unearth, right? Like things that you tweeted 10 years ago that you might not be proud of, which is like the receipts. So you put Facebook memories is like the highlights and the cancel receipts are the lowlights. So if you put them together, you actually get like a nice little representation of how you've changed over time. So maybe we can combine those, integrate those, and then like thank you for showing me how I've changed over time.
Yeah, if whatever profiles the algorithms were building of us contained our transformation trajectory,
the deltas,
we'd be in a much better position, both in terms of not judging each other too harshly, but also in terms of accepting that as transformational beings, it's okay for us to have transformed and to transform again. Yeah,
first of all, you're welcome for growing. And then second of all, let's take a little bit of a deeper look at that. I kind of want to see how I've been growing over time. It's like, am I in a rut now? What's going on? Where have I been? Where do I want to go? And the algorithms could totally do that. And like they probably already are somewhere and someone's using, but yeah, that's ultimately use them in our service, which is, it's like that's like the easiest, most obvious way that Facebook could be helpful to us right now is like, what if we could see ourselves the way Cambridge Analytica does, or in a way that actually helps us be who we want to be? That would be really helpful. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's, windows where we're more likely to be able to do this. One of the things I see with the kids is you tell them something a lot. They receive a lot of information of a certain kind, and they're either against it or it doesn't matter, nothing. And then something happens. You don't see them for a couple of weeks, and then they come back, and it's like they're a whole new person. A new floor was built into the house, and a couple of those things they've been hearing about for a while are now built into the new level. They're like, what are you talking about? I've always liked hiking. I'm like, no, you've complained about every hike we've ever been on until right now, and you assume you're into hiking now. But we went on all those hikes, and now it's part of your identity. You went through something, and that something that you went through took a few of the things that you'd previously been experiencing and built it into your next identity piece, which is fascinating. But it makes me wonder if people have these windows or these moments where they're capable of integrating some of the things they've been hearing about from other people. And up till that moment, they just don't have a place to store it.
Well, now you're asking the reckonings question. How do people change? Yeah, definitely. There are windows, which I can talk about for a long time. But yeah, I mean, big moments, change begets change. So death of a loved one, falling in love, having kids, getting sick, like any kind of, that's part of what my husband is in addiction medicine. And he especially wants to work with pregnant women because they are on the brink of a change that is like a motivated, it's like bringing life into the world is an opportunity to clean some things up. So there are definitely windows. And I would also say we are extraordinarily capable of transformation. It like, even if it's not in, there are windows, and also I am amazed in our capacity for transformation, generally speaking. Yeah.
I almost asked this question about, like, when does it not matter? Like, let's say you're a person and you've either the way you've been or the way people reacted to you, either way, created this mass outcry about some aspect of you. And you're like, right. Because part of my mind wants to be like, yeah, there must be ways and times in which you go, well, that's just not applicable. That's so not a valid accusation that I don't even have to address it. But on the other hand, maybe that's not the case. Maybe you always have to address it somehow because it has the force of you being affected by other people. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but
what do you mean? Like, when are you not influenceable? You mean?
When should you not take into account what a lot of other people are saying about you?
Yeah, I can think of one really specific example. I was going to say when you're entering the interwebs. I say I laugh, but like I think there are some circumstances, and like Twitter, certain like, and I'm actually not particularly active on Twitter, kind of being one of them. But like I am someone who I think it's really valuable to have people who just don't even engage. Like Zach Stein is like not online. I think that's great. I think it's so helpful for us to have some people who are just like not even like influenced or warped or like anything, but and like it's like they're like our modern day monks. It's like they like are in their own sanctuary, and like thank God there are people who are not. And then like I'm someone who wants to go in, and like I feel like that is part of my job that I'm here to do. And so I need to like have some armor when I'm going in, and like for the good stuff and the bad stuff. So yeah, I guess like Twitter is one example, but there are, I can imagine that what's the general principle there? where you're just going to get all kinds of shit thrown at you from all kinds of directions. And it's like less correlated to, it's less correlated to you and more to like, what's up with those people who are throwing the shit, So, yeah, I would say like helpful to have thick skins that we can shed and put on at will, or armor that we can take off and put on at will.
Yeah, there's a mix going forward of the skills we need for anti-fragility in the face of what's happening and the skills we need in order to accommodate what's happening.
Yeah, we
I
want
thought
to
of this.
feel
There's
it.
a famous story, I don't know if it's true or not, about the philosopher Voltaire being in England and being attacked by a mob of anti-French, like local Englishmen who were going to string him up. And apparently what he said to them was, "Gentlemen, yes, it is true that I am French, but in that case, do you not think I have suffered enough?" And they thought it was hilarious. So then they took him to the bar and had drinks and everything like that. But he was able to, that was a completely unfair public attack on him that he was able to lean into and take possession of in a certain way that led to a much better outcome for him personally.
Yeah. Although I think if I understand where you're going, it's like you wanna feel what's going on. You wanna like be clear about what's going on, be sober and in touch with it, and also but in a way that allows you to co-create the demi-reality. So is it like, do you just carve out spaces in your life, where you, I mean, I think it's like, yes, and whatever that looks like for you. If it means like going to the Equal Justice Memorial, is that what it's called? Brian Stevenson's like amazing museum to slavery in America and Alabama, whatever it means to you to like really get in touch with the darkness, with the shadow, but like in a way that allows you to co-create the demi-reality, right? Because if you do it in a way that just has you then mired in grief, stuck, which, if you need that for a little bit, but like, again, it's like we have a job to do here. So you want to do that in a way that allows you to act, right? So
when you set up these deep fakes, does it seem to you in hindsight that you're tracing the structure of the same move? Like, are all these cases different, or is it the same judo move in each case?
For each protagonist, I kind of have I very organically kind of came to a little bit of like a template for myself and by the way, so much has come from reckonings, right? From how people, I learned a lot from, over 400 hours interviewing people who have expanded their worldviews on climate change and guns and race and abortion and recovered from addiction and like gone through a restorative justice process around the sexual abuse of power. Like, so a lot of it is just like, I've seen the patterns, but the template that I kind of came to from that is really just a set of 3 questions that I ask myself. And it doesn't mean that the script is a response to them. It just means that that's like the material I'm kind of drawing from. One question is, what is this person reckoning with? Like, what is theirs to own? What are they having to actually take responsibility for? What kind of impact did they have? The second question is, what do I think actually happened? Like, if I give this person the utmost benefit of the doubt and assume they were like trying to do something worthy, then what would explain their behavior? And then the last question is, this is going to sound a little like patronizing maybe, but it's something like, what would a healed version or like a transformed version of this person have to teach us? Like, if this person actually went through a crisis of consciousness, like an evolution of their consciousness, really, what kind of wisdom would they come to, in the same way that all of my reckonings guests have come to some kind of, because this isn't like, I didn't want this to just be kind of like an apology. It's like, if you actually went through something where you would have learned something that is bigger than just I'm sorry, not to like minimize the importance of the apology and repairing harm, but you would have come to some insight that we need. Like, evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty. You would come to something that would help all of us move through this issue that you are also personally reckoning with.
That the fractalicious nature of the isness is there, right? Like, if you do this thing in the right way, then it's pleasurable, it's ethical, it's good for you, it's good for us. It's the exact opposite of the automobile.
And I don't want to harp on the automobile,
Not that cars are just 100% bad or anything, but we're using it as
and not all
example.
kinds of cars. Yeah, and we're using it as an example. I mean, but that also leads to the question of like, and maybe we can save this for next time. Like, could we have gotten here any other way? I don't know. Could we have gotten here without slavery in the automobile? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think that's sort of
I haven't worked that one out.
It's the wrong question. And it's
okay. Give me a better question
that goes with, I mean, it's like when other people say, hey, you're responsible for this. Now, is that true or false? That's kind of the wrong question, because it's not really about the past. It's about the present and the immediate future. Like, I don't have to agree that I'm responsible, but I could get to. I don't have to, but I get to. And that's something that happens in the next moment. So it's not really like, could it or could have not it happened a different way? Well, I don't know. We have no way of gauging that whatsoever. But what we do know is we could move forward
totally
in a different way.
What we know is we're still co-creating the demi-reality. So get on board.
I've struggled to try to take remorse more seriously as part of my spiritual practice. Because I have a little kid thing in me that's like, well, you don't, whoever that is, you don't get to say that it's my fault.
Yeah.
But then you're like, but I do. I actually can. I have the opportunity to take responsibility. And if I do, that means I'm in charge of more things. And that sounds good.
Yeah. And if that's the way to do it, totally. Because talking about blasphemous things, saying that what happened, like, doesn't, I know it's not, you're not saying it doesn't matter, but what you're saying is we can still go anywhere from here. But still, like, that is like a pretty blasphemous thing to say right now. Although I'm with you. And I also think that is a very, it's radical, it's blasphemous, and it's also incredibly empowering.
Radical, blasphemous, empowering. Sounds terrific.
I'm all about it. Let's do it. Well, it's radical because then why remember the Holocaust, right? It's blasphemous because why? It's empowering because we can still go anywhere from here.
All right, let's talk about where we could go. Let's talk about future projects. I was, interested. You were talking with Jim a little bit about, it's mostly men.
Yeah.
That you've done these reckonings with. And so I thought to myself, what's a woman, and you never know whether there's adequate footage to work with. But my first thought was Ghislaine Maxwell.
Oh, huh. There are definitely women I would love to do. Sheryl Sandberg, Nancy Pelosi. There are.
Pelosi would be great. And there's a lot of footage of her.
Mm-hmm. The reason Ghislaine, I don't know enough about her, but the thing I would say about the people, like one place where I draw the line, there's a few.
Sure.
One place where I draw the line is again at the like, what wisdom? Actually, I guess I take that back. She could come to some wisdom. For some reason, I just have this idea that there's like not that much there. Yeah. That's like a horrible thing to say. It's just, honestly, the real reason I haven't done women, and this is that I hadn't done women, and this is like, I don't feel bad being like identity politics about this, is like, women have less to reckon with. Like, it's just a fact. That's just kind of what's up historically, human civilization speaking. That's not to say, I mean, and there are plenty of women that do have a lot to reckon with. And I am definitely not discriminating based on sex or gender. So
it's, we're talking about the way that the androgenic chemicals transform the baby into a male and they make some of its parts more obvious. I think the things that men have to reckon with are often more obvious, right? It's much easier to see what Hitler did than to figure out the role that his mother played in causing those events, right? It's just much more difficult. The male way is often much more overt and easy to see.
That's also, I would say that's also radical, blasphemous, and empowering. It's like, it's potentially blasphemous to be like, well, what about his mom? But it's also empowering because it's like, I'm a mom. I can have influence. So yeah, I would put that in the radical, blasphemous, empowering category.
in the potential future projects category, you had mentioned to me that you were thinking about Elon Musk for Game B.
Yeah, I'm going to spell this out in a couple minutes, and then I actually happen to be talking to Jim about this in 6 minutes. So that is why, yeah. So, and I'm curious. So basically, so my tech partner has developed a new technology, and he wants, which is interactive deepfakes. So like a chatbot, you can chat with a chatbot, you can chat with a deepfake, which makes you feel like you're actually having a real conversation with Darth Vader, Kim Kardashian, whoever you want. Okay. So, and he wants me to basically build a demo of it. So the initial question, of course, is like, who in the world, past or present, real or not, would we want to have a chat with? Right. And my first choice was actually Lincoln, who I think it would be really helpful to talk to right now, and just use Daniel Day-Lewis. But it actually needs to be someone at this point who speaks a little more robotically. And so where I've landed, I'm very curious. Where I've landed is Elon Musk introducing Game B. And basically Elon Musk presenting himself as someone who is dominating Game A in order to transcend it, in order to help us shift into Game B, which I don't totally know whether I believe that. But I think it's possible. I mean, I also don't think he necessarily knows about it. I think it's possible. This is what I'm going to talk to Jim about. And so, yeah. What do you think? And ask me questions. Or what do you think?
I don't know what he knows about it, but I think he's got a lot of factors that would make this a good project, right? I think his personal identification with the future of the species, his sense that in general, the way people live is dumb, his impulse to disrupt businesses, futures, communities, I think all of that leans toward it. I think his impulse to be sovereign and his tech credentials make him very Game B resonant. I think Game B could be thought of as a religion of first principles in a way, right? Like you could use a lot of things that are the typical Musk talking
I hadn't thought
points.
about it that way. Huh.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of Musk says a lot of the same things over time. And you could take those things and make a strong argument that those things are essential aspects of the Game B perspective, for sure.
Huh. Cool. Layman, I may come back to you and ask you about this because you know what? I actually used in some of my thinking about whether to do this and how to do this. You posted a response about Elon Musk in the Integral Left Facebook group. And it was like things to like about him, there are things to dislike about him and things to like about him. And I was like, cool, you have a refreshingly complex understanding of Elon Musk, which is, I think, very appropriate. Cool. I might come back to you.
Yeah,
Can absolutely. I come back to you? Okay.
Absolutely. Now, I know you got to go in a minute. I just want to throw one more thing out there, which is I heard Jeff Bezos talking about he's going to go up in the rocket, right?
Yeah.
And they asked him why, and he said, well, people who get to go up in space and see the Earth often have a transformation of perspective, he said.
Yes.
And so I can imagine a situation with a deep fake of Bezos, and he's gone. He went up in the rocket. He had that change, and now he's back.
Nice.
He feels very different about how he's run Amazon, how he relates to his workers, that kind of thing.
Oh my God, I love it. I want to do that. I've been wanting to do Bezos. That is the perfect scene to stick him in, like in the spaceship with the Earth in the background, having the transformation in real time. Oh my gosh, I'm writing that down. Thank you. I love it.
All right. This is great stuff.
Cool. Thank you, Layman. This is so great. It's always so great to talk to you.
Say hi to Jim, and I'm happy to help with anything, and always fun to talk to you.
You too. Enjoy your weekend.
I will. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.